So, Happy New Year, everyone. I should have done this at the end of the year, but you know what? I kind of wanted to wait until after 2021 to discuss my favorite and least favorite things of 2021. I kind of wanted to wait a bit. I feel like I've been trying to catch up on a bunch of movies I may have missed this past year. So, I'm finally doing all this. So this video is going to be my biggest surprises last year. The movies that I didn't really have any interest in, or maybe I just didn't really hear about, or maybe just had negative thoughts going into this movie, and then I was blown away by it. Later tonight, I'm going to do a biggest disappointments video. I'm also going to do my best and worst list tomorrow, and my most anticipated movies for 2022, original and franchises, probably Thursday. So let's just dive into the movies that I surprisingly enjoyed last year. So let's start off with some honorable mentions. First off, I didn't review all these movies, so consider some of these like quick reviews. So, first up on my honorable mentions list, Till Death. This was a dark comedy-ish thriller where Megan Fox is handcuffed to her husband and he's dead and now she tries to escape. It was an interesting thriller, and even though I don't really care for the last act in the movie, I still thought it was an interesting performance by Megan Fox, and I thought it was very well done overall. The Eyes of Tammy Faye. This was a movie that nobody saw. And I really liked Jessica Chastain in this movie. I thought she completely disappeared in this movie. Andrew Garfield is also really good. Cherry Jones is also good as Tammy Faye's mother. And I also really thought it was interesting about how they portray religion. It's like, it's not necessarily against religion, but it's against people using religion to make money, which that's interesting, and you don't hear a lot about that these days, so I really like that. And even though I kind of have problems with like how some things are portrayed with Tammy Faye, I still think it's an interesting watch. Next up, Belfast. This was a movie that I kind of had no interest in. The trailer didn't really appeal to me. But this is a heartwarming movie with mostly good performances by Ciarán Hinds, Caitríona Balfe, Jamie Dornan, Jude Hill. And it was really well done, really well shot. It made me tear up, so I consider that a win. King Richard. This was a movie that admittedly I didn't think the trailer was that interesting. I heard some negative things about Richard Williams, so I wasn't really too excited for this. But I was really glad because this movie is really good. Will Smith is really good. Aunjanue Ellis is good. Jon Bernthal is good. The actresses who play Serena and Venus are really good. Also really like the whole angle they took. They didn't necessarily paint Richard Williams as the perfect saint, but they showed him as problematic. They showed him at his worst at times. And it was a movie that, you know, it shows someone doing the worst, but you still want them to be redeemed. And I thought that movie was really well done, and even though it was a bit too long, I would still recommend watching it. And the last honorable mention is Ghostbusters Afterlife. A lot of people have been hating on this movie recently, and probably because of the whole nostalgia bait thing, which I'll talk about in a minute. But I went in not really excited for this, because Ghostbusters is not a franchise that I like. Like, one decent movie, and then nothing really good happened afterwards, like with Ghostbusters 2 and the 2016 version. And especially with the 2016 version, it just became so toxic and such a dirty word to even say Ghostbusters that I just couldn't get excited for this movie, even though Paul Rudd was in it. But I saw it, and I enjoyed it. I had a lot of fun. I laughed a lot. McKenna Grace was great. Paul Rudd was really good. Even though there's a lot of nostalgia moments where I'm like, ugh, did you really have to do that? I still think it's enjoyable enough, and probably the best Ghostbusters sequel, reboot, reimagining, I don't know. Probably just the best Ghostbusters thing that's not the original. So, let's get into my actual top 10 biggest surprises of last year. Starting with at number 10 is The Last Duel. Now, admittedly, I gave this movie 2.5 out of 4 stars when I first reviewed it. And the more I thought about it, I was crazy for doing that. This was a movie where the trailer was interesting, but I wasn't like really looking forward to it too much. But after thinking about it, I really love this movie. I love performances, mainly from Jodie Comer. Adam Driver's really good. Matt Damon's also pretty good in this movie too. And it does feel epic, and I do really like how they kind of like take issues that are kind of in modern society right now, and they're kind of like applying it to this whole historical event, and I do think it does work. And even though I do say it's a bit too long, and Ben Affleck is just miscast in this movie. Man, Ben Affleck is not good in this movie. He's the worst performance in this movie, I'll say. It's still an interesting watch just as long as you can stomach 2.5 hours of this. At number 9 is West Side Story. Now, this was a movie that I was not looking forward to because I figured West Side Story was just one of those iconic movies you could not remake, you know. You can't remake Jaws, you can't remake Wizard of Oz, you can't remake Back to the Future. I don't know, you probably just can't remake West Side Story, even with Steven Spielberg directing. But this is a movie that, in ways, it does improve on the original. The musical numbers are great, a lot of the performances are really good, and it makes it just as relevant as it was back then. So, it's another movie like West Side Story, like The Last Duel, where I didn't necessarily give it the most glowing review, but the more I thought of it, I still really enjoyed it. At number 8 was a movie called Wrath of Man, starring Jason Statham. Now, this was a movie that I was also not looking forward to, because I'm not a big fan of Guy Ritchie as a director. I feel like a lot of his movies are just too similar to each other. I can't tell, like, I felt like his last movie, The Gentleman, was just kind of mediocre at best. Mainly because I just felt like, oh, it's like his other movies, like Snatch, for instance, and Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels. It just wasn't really anything new that he was doing. But Wrath of Man was something new. I really liked the dark humor. I really liked a lot of the performances, mainly from Jason Statham, Josh Hartnett, of all people. Holt McCallany was also really good. And it's also surprisingly well made. It's like, it does take itself seriously enough, and it's still kind of funny at times. I just thought it was a really well done movie overall. At number 7 was Spencer, starring Kristen Stewart. Now, this was a really big surprise for me because I've never seen Kristen Stewart give a great performance in a movie before. I know a lot of people say she's a great actress. I just have not seen any of the movies she's done that weren't called Twilight. So, to see her in a movie like this and just completely disappear and just appear as Princess Diana and just be completely unrecognizable, she is fantastic in this movie. And also, I really like the way it's presented. It presents itself as like this kind of nightmarish movie, and the score's really great. There's moments where I'm just like kind of like unease, like I'm just like scared for what's happening, and it's a very well done movie overall. I would recommend checking it out. At number 6 was Shang-Chi. Now, this was a lot of fun. Now, of all the Marvel movies that were coming out this year, this was the one that I was not really looking forward to. This is probably the one I was looking forward to the least, to be honest. But I enjoyed it a lot more than Black Widow and Eternals, which I'll talk about in my next video. But it was a lot of fun. I thought the characters were really good. I thought the villain was really good, especially. Visually, it was impressive. The fight scenes were impressive. That bus scene. I'm really glad that that bus scene was better than it was in the trailer. It was the Marvel movie, the worst trailer, and probably one of the most fun movies I've seen all year. At number 5 is Free Guy. Now, this was a movie that, back in 2020, I was really looking forward to this. And then it kind of kept getting delayed and kept getting delayed, and I felt like with the trailers, they kind of just kept showing the same thing over and over again. It's like, oh, I hope they just don't spoil the entire movie. I hope they didn't. And thankfully they don't. There's a lot to this movie that they just didn't spoil. So, thank God for that. And, you know, the performances are really good. Ryan Reynolds is good. Jodie Comer's good. Lil Rel Howery's really good. Taika Waititi's fine. He kind of can get on your nerves at times as the villain. But it's a lot of fun. It's a kind of like a newer... I was about to compare this to The Truman Show. It's like, I can't really do that, but... You know, it's very well done. It's a lot of fun. And I initially was going to give it like 2.5 out of 4 stars when I saw it, but I had a blast with it. I enjoyed Free Guy, to be honest. At number 4 is another movie I didn't get a chance to review, and that was Werewolves Within. This is a movie that is also a lot of fun. Sam Richardson's really good in this movie. And kind of like after playing games like that, where you're trying to figure out like who is the murderer, like a mafia type game. Like, that is a lot of fun, and it's kind of seeing that in a movie and kind of everyone kind of like having all the reactions that I've seen people have is just really funny. I couldn't predict the twist. I mean, admittedly, I kind of did predict the twist at the end, but other than that, it's a lot of fun. At number 3 was Coda. Now, this was a movie that I heard about. I knew it was at Sundance, and I kind of forgot about it. And then I saw it, and I thought it was a really sweet and touching movie that, you know... It doesn't necessarily portray everyone as perfect human beings, but doesn't really portray them as, you know, not everyone in this movie is great, but not everyone in this movie is awful on purpose. Like, everyone is kind of like, they want what's best, and they kind of try to come to terms with, like, you know, having each other in their lives, and especially considering the fact that, you know, the 3 out of the 4 main stars in this movie are actually deaf. That's also really, really nicely done. And... it doesn't really treat anyone poorly. I just feel like This is a movie where it's like you can completely understand where everyone's coming from and you don't really want to villainize everyone. And I'm also really glad right now it is getting a lot of buzz. It has gotten a lot of nominations, particularly for Troy Kotsur. I don't know, I probably mispronounced that. But he was one of the best in the movie, and I really liked his performance, so I'm really glad about that. At number 2 was Annette. This movie, I would say this is the craziest movie of the year, but I did see Malignant afterwards, and I just watched Titan recently. So, this may not be the weirdest movie of the year, but for what it is, it's pretty weird. Adam Driver and Marion Cotillard play a couple who fall in love, get married, have a child with a weird gift, and that's all I'll say. It's also a musical. Pretty much an opera. A tragic story. And it is so twisted. I couldn't predict a lot of it. Everyone in this movie is really good. Adam Driver's really good. Marion Cotillard's really good. Simon Helberg, from The Big Bang Theory of all people, was really good in this movie too. I couldn't predict anything that happened. A lot of the songs, they're kind of catchy, but also they may be a bit pretentious at times. I mentioned there's this one where they sing the same line over and over again, and it just kind of felt pretentious to me. I do think it is worth checking out, especially if you're looking for something that's just so out of the box and just so unbelievable. And, you know, I just kind of felt all the emotion that I should have gotten from this movie, is all I'll say. And speaking of feeling of all the emotions, number 1. My number 1 biggest surprise was another movie I didn't review, but because I just saw it a couple nights ago, and that was Mass. Mass was a movie that broke me. This was one of the few movies where it's like, okay, I heard about it, but I'll probably check it out at some point. And unfortunately, it didn't come to my town at all. I had to wait until it was available on digital to see this. And the movie is about two sets of parents. One had their son killed in a mass shooting, and the other had their son be the shooter. And they basically the entire room is just the 4 of them talking. And it is just so unnerving just watching this movie, kind of just waiting to hear, like, who's going to explode next. Like, and all the performances in this movie are really good, particularly from Martha Plimpton, Ann Dowd, Jason Isaacs. They're all really good in this movie. All 4 of the lead actors are really good in this movie. And I also really like the conversations that they're having, and I just feel like this is kind of everything that I feel like people have been saying for years about this situation. And I'm really glad that a movie like this is out there. But of course, no one is seeing this thing. And that's a shame. I really want people to see this movie. I really want people to talk about this movie and have conversations about the conversations they had in this movie. It's really something that I feel like you need to see it. You can forget all these other movies I mentioned, but see Mass. It's worth it. So, those are my picks for the top 10 biggest surprises of last year. What was the most surprising movie to you last year? Comment down below. Subscribe to the channel. This is Pat. Stay safe.